Today, I will tell you a story that began on a day meant for love and gratitude, Mother's Day. Families gathered across the country to honor the women who raised them. In my son's house, the dining room glowed with string lights and polished silverware, laughter echoing between walls hung with family portraits. Yet beneath the clinking of glasses and the cheer of children, I overheard something that froze me where I stood. At the family table, with turkey steaming and wine poured, someone whispered about my death. Plans already drawn, details arranged, as though I were not alive to hear them. Their voices carried no grief, only convenience. I stood in the hallway, the warmth of the apple pie dish pressing into my palms, and for one long moment I thought my knees might give way. But I did not turn back. I stepped forward. I walked into that dining room as though nothing had touched me. I took my seat at the far end, my back straight, my expression calm. I even smiled, not because I felt joy, but because I understood something with painful clarity. If they had already planned my absence, then I would plan my response. That day, on Mother's Day, I became invisible at my own table. But invisibility has its uses. They thought I had no strength left. They thought wrong. If you want to hear how this story unfolds, remember to like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts. This is part of Grandma Life Stories, where dignity, justice, and quiet strength always find their way to the light. My name is Helen Ward, 72 years old, a retired teacher, a widow, a mother who gave everything she had for family. I believed in second chances, in forgiveness, in sacrifice. But as I sat at that table, hearing their whispers circle around me like smoke, I felt something harden inside. Not bitterness, not despair, something sharper. I smiled back at them, the kind of smile that shields a wounded heart. They thought I had not heard. They thought I was just another shadow in the room. That was their mistake. And from that moment, the story truly began. Clara lifted the bottle of wine with deliberate elegance, tilting it so the red liquid flowed smoothly into her glass. The sound of the pour cut through the chatter, and then her voice followed, soft, honeyed, rehearsed. "Mother, how have you been feeling these days? You know, at your age, living alone can be dangerous. Maybe it's time we start preparing for what's inevitable. It would be easier for everyone." The words hit me harder than any shout could. They were framed as concern, yet every syllable carried calculation. She spoke not as a daughter-in-law offering care, but as an executor rehearsing a script. Michael did not flinch. He raised his glass to hers, their crystal stemware colliding with a hollow chime. No objection, no rebuke, no defense of his mother's dignity. He simply drank. That silence was the cruelest cut. I kept my expression composed, but inside fire roared. My pulse hammered against my ribs. Every instinct screamed to stand, to confront, to demand an explanation. Instead, I chose stillness. Stillness has weight. It unsettles those who expect weakness. I smiled again, small and cold, the kind of smile that conceals steel beneath skin. Clara leaned back in her chair, satisfied with herself. "It's really about making sure you're comfortable," she continued, her tone bright, her eyes sharp. "Places like Greenfield can handle everything with dignity. You wouldn't want us to be overwhelmed, would you?" My fork clinked against the plate. I forced my hands steady. I studied her across the table, the flawless makeup, the pearl earrings glinting under the lights, the posture of a woman who lived for appearances. But beneath that gloss, there was hunger. Control was her true obsession. Michael shifted in his seat, but said nothing. His silence weighed heavier than her words. I searched his face, remembering the boy who once tugged at my sleeve in crowded stores, the child who once feared losing sight of me. Now he sat complicit, a man who chose convenience over conscience. "Mother," Clara pressed, lowering her voice just enough to draw attention, "we should schedule a consultation soon. These things take time, and it's always better to be proactive. You agree, don't you?" The table hushed. Even the children's chatter stilled, as if the air itself waited for my reply. My gaze swept the room, catching eyes that darted away, relatives who would not stand beside me. They all pretended interest in their plates, in their glasses, in anything but the cruelty unfolding in plain sight. I let the silence stretch. Seconds lengthened, my chest tightened, but my voice came steady. "I appreciate your concern, Clara." I let the pause hang like a blade. "But I think I can manage my own affairs." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but she recovered quickly. "Of course, I only want what's best." "What's best? For whom?" The turkey cooled on my plate. The wine soured in the glass. Every detail of that room imprinted itself on me. The flicker of candles against polished silver, the murmur of cousins exchanging awkward glances, the faint scent of rosemary drifting from the kitchen. Ordinary details, yet now poisoned by betrayal. I studied Michael again. His jaw tightened, his hand gripping the stem of his glass too firmly, but he remained mute. By choosing silence, he chose her side. He chose convenience over blood. I swallowed the bitterness burning at the back of my throat. They thought this performance would break me, push me quietly into submission. They expected compliance, gratitude for their foresight. But as Clara's words echoed inside me, I felt something else awaken. Anger, yes, but sharper than anger. Resolve. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of shallow conversation. They spoke of vacations, of renovations, of business deals. They spoke around me, over me, never to me. I sat among them like a ghost, already treated as if I were gone. But ghosts see everything. Clara reached for my plate before I had finished. "You've eaten enough," she said lightly, sliding it away as if I were a child. My hands curled in my lap, nails pressing against skin. I forced my body still. My stillness was not surrender. It was strategy. When the toasts came, Michael stood, lifting his glass high. "To family," he declared. The word twisted in my ears. Family, spoken by a man who could not lift his voice to protect his own mother. Glasses clinked, laughter followed. I raised my water in response, but inside I made a vow. The vow hardened further when I saw Clara watching me, eyes glinting with triumph. She believed she had pushed me closer to the grave she had already outlined in her mind. She thought her words had settled the matter. She mistook silence for defeat. As the evening ended, I rose with them, cleared dishes no one offered to take from me, wiped spills no one else noticed. My body ached, but I stood tall. Every small act, every polite gesture became armor. They would not see me falter. When I finally left the table, I carried my empty pie dish, still warm from the oven, still untouched. It felt like a symbol in my hands, a gift offered and rejected, just as I had been. I walked out of that house with my head high. My steps were measured, deliberate. I left behind their laughter, their shallow talk, their cruelty disguised as civility. The night air hit my face, sharp and cold, and I breathed it in like a promise. They had revealed themselves. They had shown me exactly how far they were willing to go. They thought their cruelty would bury me, but it did the opposite. That night, as I placed the empty pie dish on my kitchen counter, I whispered into the silence of my home, "They planned my funeral on Mother's Day, but I am not done. I will decide how this story ends." And with that vow, the fight truly began. When I closed the door behind me that night, silence rushed in. No clinking glasses, no forced laughter, no honeyed cruelty wrapped in polite tones. Just the creak of my old brick house settling against the wind and the echo of Clara's words still hammering in my skull. They had lifted their glasses to family while plotting my end. That silence now was heavier than any noise I had left behind. I set the empty pie dish on the counter. My kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon and butter, a reminder of the pie no one touched. I stood still for a long moment, staring at that dish, realizing it symbolized more than rejection. It symbolized erasure. I had been erased from my own family, and they expected me to vanish quietly. No. I walked to the study, my steps sharp against the wood floor. The house glowed with a dim amber light from the old lamp I switched on. Shadows stretched across the walls lined with books and photographs. My hand went to the file cabinet I hadn't opened in years. Cold metal under my fingers, the drawer screeched as I pulled it open. Inside were folders thick with documents, a life measured in paper. Tax returns, deeds, letters, every proof of survival and sacrifice. As I sorted through them, something slipped loose and fluttered to the floor. A yellowed envelope, its edges softened by time. My breath caught when I recognized the handwriting. Frank's, steady and strong, written 30 years earlier. I knelt and picked it up. The flap was already torn, as if waiting for me. I unfolded the paper. The ink had faded, but the words cut clear. "Don't let anyone decide for you. Promise me that, Helen. Promise me you will always be the one to hold the pen." My throat tightened, but not from grief, from clarity. Frank had known the world could turn cruel. He had left me this reminder not as comfort, but as armor, and tonight it fit. I pressed the letter flat against the desk, beside the deed to this house. The deed bore both our names. I traced his signature with my finger, steadying myself. They wanted me to believe I had no power left, that I was frail, expendable. But here was proof otherwise. My name was inked in legal permanence. I whispered into the quiet, "I hear you, Frank. I promise." The promise was not sentimental. It was tactical. They had made their intentions plain, and now I would answer in kind. I pulled out a thick folder of financial statements, bank accounts, pension papers. I stacked them neatly on the desk. Each page represented leverage, each document a piece of the armor I would build. I was no longer a guest at their table. I was the architect of my own defense. I remembered Clara's smile when she spoke of Greenfield Funeral Home, her tone light, as if she were suggesting a vacation. Rage sparked again, but I channeled it. Rage without control is wasted. What I needed was precision. I opened a drawer and pulled out a notebook. Its cover was cracked, but its pages were blank. Tonight, it would no longer be blank. I wrote the first line with deliberate pressure. "They planned my funeral. I will plan my revenge." The words steadied me. I wrote bullet points beneath. Review deed and ownership. Secure independent legal counsel. Check all bank accounts for unauthorized access. Protect Emily if she becomes a target. Writing turned the chaos in my chest into order on the page. Every point was a step up from the pit they had dug for me. The clock ticked past midnight. I rose, crossed to the window, and looked out at the quiet street. The brick walls of my house had weathered storms before. They would hold through this one. Behind me, the lamplight fell on Frank's letter and the deed. I felt them like anchors. I spoke aloud, my voice low but hard. "You will not take this from me. You will not script my ending." The house seemed to listen, as though the bricks themselves absorbed my vow. I sat back down, drew the deed closer, and slipped it into a fireproof box I kept hidden in the closet. One by one, I added documents: the pension records, the insurance policy, the savings account statements. I locked the box and set it back into its place, secure and untouchable. When I turned off the lamp, the study went dark, but inside me, something blazed. For years, I had been quiet, accommodating, eager to believe family loyalty would shield me. That illusion was gone. In its place was something sharper than grief, stronger than fear. They had pushed me toward a grave, but instead they pushed me toward clarity. As I walked toward my bedroom, I carried Frank's letter in my hand. I placed it on the nightstand beside me, not as comfort, but as a contract. Tomorrow the fight would begin. Tonight, I rested with a plan forming in my mind, sharp as glass. I whispered again into the dark, "I promise, Frank, no one decides for me. Not now. Not ever." The house held my words like a fortress, and with that, I closed my eyes, not defeated, but armed. The next afternoon, my phone buzzed with a quiet message. "Grandma, can I come by?" It was Emily, my granddaughter, 17 years old, bright, sharp-eyed, too perceptive for her own comfort. She sounded nervous in the text, but I told her yes. Within an hour, she was standing in my kitchen, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her face pale, as if she had carried a weight too heavy for someone her age. She didn't take off her coat or ask for tea. She went straight to the kitchen table, dropped her backpack, and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Her hands trembled slightly as she slid it across the wood. "Grandma," she whispered, eyes darting toward the windows, though no one could hear us. "They already decided." I unfolded the paper. The black and white words seared into me like a brand. Draft will. My name was there once, crossed out with a digital strike. Next to it, a single name remained. Michael. Full authority, full control, as though I were already gone. For a long moment, I said nothing. My chest was tight, but not with surprise. Clara's voice at the dinner table had already told me the truth. This was proof on paper, undeniable. My son, my blood, had planned to erase me legally as well as emotionally. Emily's voice shook. "I wasn't trying to snoop. I borrowed Dad's laptop for homework. The file just popped up in the recent documents. I thought it was a school form, but when I opened it..." She bit her lip hard, her eyes filling with shame she didn't deserve. "I printed it. I didn't know what else to do." I reached for her hand. "You did the right thing." My voice was firm, steady, sharper than she had ever heard it before. She blinked at me, surprised. "You're not crying?" "No," I said, folding the page neatly, placing it beside me as though filing evidence. "Crying wastes energy. This needs action." Her brows knitted. "Grandma, what are you going to do?" I studied her face, the wide brown eyes, the flicker of fear, the desperate hope. This child, caught between loyalty to her father and love for me, I would not let her carry more of the burden. "The only thing we can do," I said evenly, "we prepare." The paper burned against my palm as I rose from the table. I walked to the old study, Emily trailing behind. The lamp threw its golden glow across the desk where Frank's letter still rested. His words whispered again in my mind. "Don't let anyone decide for you." I laid the draft will beside the letter. 2 documents, decades apart, telling the same story. One urged me to fight. The other proved why I must. Emily's voice cracked the silence. "Dad shouldn't..." She stopped, swallowed hard, then forced the words. "He shouldn't be doing this to you." Her loyalty broke my heart, but it also steeled my resolve. "Your father has made his choice," I said. "Now I will make mine." Emily sank into the chair across from me. She looked at the old photographs on the wall, her eyes pausing on one of her father as a boy in my arms, grinning with the innocence of a child who trusted completely. "He wasn't always like this," she whispered. "I know," I replied, my voice like stone. "But people reveal who they are when power is at stake." I picked up a pen and wrote across the top of my notebook, "Proof of intent." Then I wrote the date and added, "Draft will located by Emily Ward, 5:32 p.m. Source, Michael's laptop. Contents, Helen Ward removed, Michael Ward, sole authority." I looked at her. "We document everything. If they think I'm powerless, they underestimate me." Emily's eyes lit with a spark I hadn't seen before. "Do you want me to help? I can keep copies, back things up. Dad doesn't think I notice much, but I do." A sharp pride filled me. "Yes, but you must be careful. Never let them suspect. If they ask, you know nothing. Do you understand?" She nodded quickly, determination tightening her young face. The weight of the paper in front of me was heavy, but it did not crush me. It armed me. Every betrayal added another layer of steel. Clara's whispers at the table had been the first cut. This draft will was the second. Cuts can bleed, or they can harden. I chose hardening. I folded the page again, slid it into a fresh envelope, and sealed it. Then I unlocked the fireproof box, placed it carefully inside with Frank's letter and the deed. I clicked the lock shut with finality. When I turned back, Emily was watching me. She saw not a frail grandmother, but a woman sharpening herself for battle. "Grandma," she whispered, "they don't know you at all." A thin smile touched my lips. "No, they don't. And that will be their downfall." The kitchen clock struck 6. The chime echoed through the house, steady, relentless. It sounded not like time passing, but like time running out for those who thought me weak. Emily stood and shouldered her backpack. "I'll text you if I see anything else." I reached out, touched her cheek gently. "Be careful, child. This is not your fight to carry, but you have given me a weapon I needed. Remember that." She nodded, hugged me quickly, and left through the side door, disappearing into the evening. I stayed in the study long after she was gone. The lamp flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. I stared at the locked box, at the envelope sealed inside, proof of betrayal, proof of intent, proof that my son and his wife were not planning my care, but my absence. I whispered into the quiet, "So it begins." The house held my words, the bricks as steady as my resolve. I felt the shift inside me settle like iron. They thought they had written the ending. They had only written the opening line. The morning sun was sharp when I stepped out of my house. I had not slept well, but sleep no longer mattered. The paper Emily had shown me still burned in my memory, its digital ink crossing me out like I was nothing. I needed answers, and answers do not come from whispers. They come from records, from signatures, from paper that cannot lie. First Midwest Bank stood tall downtown, glass walls reflecting the restless traffic of the city. I walked through its revolving doors, the air-conditioned chill hitting me like a warning. Polished marble floors stretched beneath my feet, every step echoing with a determination I no longer bothered to hide. At the reception desk, a young clerk smiled politely. "Good morning, ma'am. Do you have an appointment?" "I need to speak with a branch manager," I said firmly. "Now." Her smile faltered at the sharpness of my tone, but she nodded quickly, typing something into her screen. Within minutes, a man in a crisp suit appeared. His hair was graying at the temples, his handshake practiced. "Mrs. Ward, I'm Richard Coleman. How can I help you today?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I want to know if my name has been used on any loan documents connected to my son, Michael Ward." The manager blinked, surprised. He gestured toward his office. "Please, come with me." Inside, the room was neat, sterile. Framed certificates lined the wall. A clock ticked quietly. He offered me a seat, but I remained standing. "Mrs. Ward, may I ask why you're inquiring?" "My reasons are my own," I replied, my voice hard. "What I need is the truth." He cleared his throat, turned to his computer, and began typing. The silence stretched. I watched his expression change, subtle but undeniable. The tightening of his jaw, the shift of his eyes. He had found something. When he finally spoke, his tone was cautious. "Yes, there are records indicating your name was used as guarantor on a loan Michael Ward secured 2 years ago. It appears he leveraged your credit and assets as collateral." The words struck me, but I did not flinch. I had already suspected as much. Now it was confirmed. "Did I sign those documents?" I asked. He hesitated. "I cannot say definitively. The documents bear a signature under your name, but—" He trailed off, his eyes flicking to me. "But what?" "But the signature looks inconsistent, not identical to the one I see on your file here." He pulled up a scanned copy of my old account signature card, then turned his screen slightly toward me. "Do you see the difference?" I leaned forward, my gaze steady. My true signature was clean, deliberate, the mark of a teacher who had written her name 1,000 times on report cards. The one on the loan was clumsy, rushed, too wide on the stroke. I straightened, my jaw tightening. "That is not my hand." Mr. Coleman shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Ward, this is a serious matter. Forgery." I cut him off. "Print me every document tied to that loan, every page with my name." He hesitated, but my glare left no room for negotiation. Within minutes, the printer whirred, spitting out a thick stack of papers. He slid them into a folder and pushed it toward me. I picked it up, the weight of it solid in my hands. This was not just paper. It was evidence. It was betrayal carved in ink. "Do you want me to initiate an internal investigation?" he asked carefully. "Not yet," I said. My voice was calm, but it carried steel. "First, I need to understand how deep this goes. If I need the law, I will come back. For now, this stays between us." He nodded slowly, recognizing the resolve in my eyes. "Very well, Mrs. Ward." I thanked him with a curt nod, then turned and walked out. The marble floor no longer echoed. My steps were silent, controlled, like a predator leaving with its prey. Outside, the wind caught my coat, tugging it around me as if urging me forward. I slipped the folder into my bag and held it close. At the corner of the street, I paused. The city moved fast around me, horns blaring, voices rising, people rushing with their own lives. None of them knew that inside my bag was proof that my own son had stolen my name, my trust, my safety. I whispered into the noise, low and steady. "I have been silent too long." It was not a complaint, it was a declaration. The truth had a taste, sharp, metallic, unyielding, and once tasted, it could not be forgotten. They had taken my silence for weakness. Now, armed with these papers, I would turn their theft into their downfall. I tightened my grip on the folder, lifted my chin, and stepped into the flow of the city. The fight was no longer in whispers. It was in writing, in signatures, in evidence that no charm or lie could erase. For years, I had let them believe I was easy to dismiss. That ended at First Midwest Bank. The invitation came in a neatly worded text from Clara. "Mother, let's have brunch at the country club this Sunday. Just the three of us. My treat." I read it twice, knowing her sudden generosity carried weight. Clara never invited me anywhere unless there was something to gain. Still, I agreed. When predators set the stage, sometimes the best move is to let them believe the prey will play along. That Sunday, the club gleamed with polished wood, brass fixtures, and the low hum of wealth. Tables draped in white linen stood beneath chandeliers, fresh flowers arranged in perfect symmetry. Clara wore a pastel dress, pearls at her neck, her smile broad and false. Michael sat beside her, distracted, sipping coffee as though he were anywhere but here. "Mother," Clara greeted warmly, rising to kiss the air near my cheek. "Doesn't this place look beautiful? Only the best for family." I forced a small nod, my eyes scanning the table already set for three. But as soon as I sat, a fourth chair scraped back. A man in a tailored suit, his tie perfectly knotted, joined us. Clara gestured casually. "This is Mr. Harlan. He's a financial advisor we've been consulting. He specializes in estate planning." There it was, the trap laid bare. Mr. Harlan extended his hand with a polished smile. "Mrs. Ward, such a pleasure. Your family speaks so highly of you." I shook his hand lightly, my grip firmer than he expected. "Is that so?" Clara leaned in, voice dripping with feigned care. "Mother, with everything going on, we thought it wise to help you simplify. Fewer burdens, more peace of mind. Mr. Harlan has drawn up some documents to make sure everything is taken care of properly." She produced a slim leather folder, sliding it across the linen toward me. The gold clasp glinted in the light. Michael finally spoke, his voice low. "It's nothing complicated, just standard procedure." I opened the folder slowly. Inside lay a stack of crisp papers, neatly tabbed. The bold header at the top of the first page read, "Property Transfer Agreement, my house, my name, my signature line, blank and waiting." Clara's voice softened, coaxing. "Mother, all you need to do is sign. We'll handle everything else. Taxes, upkeep, decisions, it will all be managed." She placed a pen in my hand. The gesture was gentle, but her eyes gleamed with the confidence of a woman certain victory was near. I curled my fingers around the pen, letting it tremble slightly. To them, it must have looked like weakness, the shake of an old woman overwhelmed by responsibility. Michael glanced at Clara, satisfied. Clara's smile widened. "Go on," she urged sweetly. "This is what's best for everyone." I lowered the tip of the pen to the line, paused, and let my hand still. Then I lifted my head, my gaze locking with Clara's. The tremor in my hand vanished. My voice cut through the clatter of dishes and murmurs around us. "No one touches my house. Not you, not him, not anyone." The air snapped tight. Conversations at nearby tables faltered. Clara's smile froze, cracking at the edges. Michael shifted, his jaw tightening. "Mother," Clara began, her tone brittle. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I interrupted, my voice cold as steel. "You've mistaken patience for surrender. That was your mistake." Mr. Harlan cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. "Perhaps this isn't the right moment." I turned to him, sliding the folder back across the table. "No, it isn't. And it never will be." Clara's mask slipped. Her words came sharper now, the sweetness gone. "We're trying to protect you. Do you want to see everything fall apart? Do you want to burden us with your mess when you're gone?" I leaned forward, my smile thin, deliberate. "What I want is to remind you this is not your table to set, nor your pen to wield. I built my life without your permission. I will not give it away with your paperwork." Michael finally broke his silence. His voice was taut, edged with frustration. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "Harder for whom?" I asked. "For you, who stand to gain, or for me, who stands to lose everything I worked for?" His mouth opened, then closed, no words forming. I set the pen down firmly on the folder and pushed it toward Clara. The sound was sharp against the table, final. "No one will ever force my hand again." For a moment, none of them moved. Clara's knuckles whitened as she clutched the folder. Her eyes burned with rage she couldn't disguise. Michael stared at his untouched coffee, unable to meet my gaze. I rose from my seat, smoothing the wrinkles from my coat. My voice carried just enough to be heard by the curious ears nearby. "Enjoy your brunch. I'll enjoy my freedom." And with that, I walked out of the country club, my steps steady, my back unbent. The chandeliers glittered behind me, but their light could not follow where I was going. On the sidewalk outside, the air was sharp with the scent of cut grass and spring blossoms. I inhaled deeply, the weight of the encounter settling into resolve. They thought they could corner me with polished smiles and legal jargon. They thought wrong. I touched the edge of my bag where Frank's letter still rested inside its envelope. His words echoed again. "Don't let anyone decide for you." I whispered to myself, low but firm. "You were right, Frank. They will never decide for me. Not now. Not ever." The sound of traffic surged around me, life moving on, indifferent. But inside, the fire burned hotter. Clara had revealed her true face. Michael had revealed his silence. And I had revealed finally that I was not afraid to fight. They had pushed their papers across the table, but I had pushed back harder, and the war between us had only just begun. The morning after the country club ambush, I needed stillness, not the kind found in empty rooms, but the kind carried in old wooden pews that smelled of beeswax and hymnals. So I walked to St. Matthew's, the church I had attended on and off since Frank's funeral. The doors stood open, sunlight spilling through stained glass, painting the stone floor with fractured blues and reds. Reverend Thomas was there, straightening hymnals. He was a tall man with silver hair and a voice that always seemed both gentle and unshakable. He looked up when he saw me. "Helen," he said warmly, "you haven't been by in a while." I managed a small smile. "I've been busy." He motioned me toward the front pew. I sat, my hands folded tight, the lines of my knuckles stark against the light. He sat beside me, leaving just enough space for honesty to breathe. "Tell me," he said softly. I didn't recount every detail. I didn't need to. The words brunch, documents, and my house were enough. His eyes sharpened with quiet understanding. "They are circling," I said, my voice low. Clara hides behind sweet words, and Michael sits in silence, letting her sharpen the knives. "They think I'm too tired to resist." Reverend Thomas leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His voice carried the weight of conviction. "Helen, patience is not silence. Silence has its place, but it is not the same as surrender. God gave you a voice. Do not let it be buried under their schemes." I looked at him, startled by the force in his words. "And if they don't listen?" "Then you speak louder," he replied simply. "Not in volume, but in truth. There are people who mistake kindness for weakness. You remind them that kindness is a choice, not an obligation." The church was empty but for us, yet his words seemed to echo off the walls. For a moment I felt Frank beside me again, steadying my spine the way he used to when life grew cruel. I asked quietly, "What if my own son stands against me?" His gaze softened, but he didn't flinch. "Then you grieve the boy you raised, and you stand against the man he has become. That is not betrayal, Helen. That is survival, and it is righteousness." I breathed in sharply, the truth of it cutting deep. I had been mourning in silence for years, the boy who once hugged my waist with sticky hands, the child who trusted me with his nightmares. But that boy had long since vanished. What remained was a man who let his wife plot my erasure. The Reverend's tone gentled, though the steel remained. "Your faith is not in Michael. It is not in Clara. It is not in the papers they slide across tables. Your faith is in God and in yourself. And both of those say you are not finished yet." My throat tightened. Throat. For the first time in days, my eyes burned, but I did not cry. I refused to give them that. He clasped his hands together. "You want scripture? Here it is. Proverbs 29, verse 25. The fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. Don't let fear dictate your choices." I nodded slowly, the words settling into me like stones creating a foundation. "They think they can plan my end," I murmured, "but I am not done. Not yet." Reverend Thomas smiled faintly. "Then prove them wrong. Walk with courage, and when the time comes, speak with the authority of a woman who knows her worth." I stood, steadier than when I entered. He rose with me, placing a hand lightly on my shoulder. "Helen, remember, God gave you life. No one else has the right to decide when it loses meaning." I met his eyes, my own now sharp with resolve. "Thank you, Reverend, for reminding me I still have teeth." His chuckle was low and approving. "Use them wisely, but don't be afraid to bite when cornered." As I left the church, the sun struck my face, bright and clean. For the first time in years, I did not feel like a shadow in my own story. I felt like a storm gathering strength. I walked home through the streets of Chicago, the noise of traffic and the scent of bakeries mixing in the spring air. Every step felt different, firmer, more deliberate. Clara's schemes no longer felt like chains. They felt like fuel. Michael's silence no longer felt like absence. It felt like proof that he had forfeited his right to decide for me. Back in my red brick house, I placed Reverend Thomas's words beside Frank's old letter in my mind. Two men, different voices, the same message. Do not let them decide for you. I stood at the window watching the street, my reflection faint in the glass. My lips moved, quiet but certain. They planned my funeral on Mother's Day. I will plan my revenge. The vow settled in me, calm and sharp. Not born of rage, but of justice. And I knew the next time Clara slid papers across a table, it would not be me who trembled. It would be her. The morning after I left St. Matthew's, I knew where my next step had to be. Reverend Thomas had reminded me of my voice, but I also knew words meant nothing without signatures that held weight in courtrooms. So I called the law office of Linda Chavez, an estate attorney I had met years ago through a church fundraiser. Her secretary gave me an appointment that same afternoon. The office stood in a modest building downtown, nothing like the marble facades Clara favored. Inside, though, it was sharp and precise. Rows of files stacked neatly, framed diplomas lining the walls, a faint smell of coffee and ink. Linda rose as I entered, her dark hair pulled into a sleek bun, glasses perched low on her nose. "Helen," she said warmly, but her eyes carried the keen appraisal of someone who wasted no time. "It's been a while. What brings you in?" I sat, sliding my bag onto the chair beside me. "I need to create a living trust, effective immediately, and I want my son cut out of everything." Her brows lifted slightly, but she didn't press for drama. She simply nodded. "All right, let's talk specifics." I leaned forward, my hands folded. "The house is the centerpiece. It's in my name alone. When I'm gone, I don't want it passing to Michael, Clara, or anyone under their influence. It should be sold, with proceeds going to the Greenfield Women's Shelter. They need it more than he ever will." Linda tapped her pen against a legal pad, jotting notes in brisk strokes. "Good. And other assets? Accounts? Insurance?" "Every cent left in my accounts should be transferred to a scholarship fund for my granddaughter Emily. She has potential Clara will never nurture. She deserves a chance at a life without their shadow." Linda's eyes flicked up. "You're certain? No allocations to Michael at all?" I held her gaze steady. "I've been certain since Mother's Day. He planned my funeral at my own table. That was his declaration of war. This," I tapped the table between us, "is mine." She gave a short, approving nod. "Then we'll draft it airtight. No loopholes, no room for challenge." As she typed, I watched the screen, the words forming like stone walls around my future. Each clause severed Michael's grip a little more. Each stipulation was another shield against Clara's manipulations. At one point, Linda asked, "Executor preference?" I answered without hesitation. "Not family, not friends easily swayed. Appoint a neutral fiduciary, someone professional who answers only to the law." "Done," she said, fingers flying. I signed preliminary drafts, the scratch of my pen loud in the quiet office. My hand was steady, steadier than it had been in years. Linda glanced at me as I pressed ink to paper. "You don't look uncertain," she remarked. "I'm not," I replied. "For too long I let them believe I was fragile. But weakness is a costume, and I'm finished wearing it." The final document slid before me, its pages thick, the legal language dense and unforgiving. The title read, "Living Trust of Helen Ward." I took the pen once more. The room seemed to still, the hum of the printer and faint chatter from the receptionist fading. I lowered the pen to the signature line and signed with slow, deliberate precision, my name clear and sharp. As I lifted the pen, Linda stamped the notary seal with a firm press. The sound echoed like a gavel. "There," she said. "It's official. Your house, your money, your legacy, no longer theirs to touch." I leaned back in the chair, exhaling deeply. Relief wasn't the right word. It was something heavier, cleaner. The feeling of chains sliding off after years of quiet weight. I spoke softly, more to myself than to her. "I have waited too long. I will not wait anymore." Linda closed the folder and pushed it gently toward me. "You've taken the first step, Helen. But you should know, once they find out, they'll push harder. They always do." I smiled faintly, cold but resolute. "Let them push. They'll find I'm no longer standing where they think I am." When I left the office, the Chicago streets seemed louder, sharper, alive with horns and hurried footsteps. But inside, I felt calm. Not the calm of resignation, but the calm of someone who had just loaded the first arrow into her bow. On the train home, I stared out the window, the city rushing by in gray and steel. My reflection stared back, eyes brighter than I remembered. The words of Frank's letter, Reverend Thomas's counsel, and now Linda's ink merged into one truth. I was not merely defending. I was attacking. That evening in my kitchen, I spread the documents on the table beneath the warm yellow light. Emily's name gleamed from the page, tied to the scholarship clause. The Greenfield Women's Shelter sat written in black ink as the heir to my home. Clara's name was nowhere. Michael's name had been erased like chalk from a board. I touched the line where my signature rested, steady and final. My voice was low, almost a growl. The board is reset. The pieces are mine. The clock ticked on the wall. Outside, the street was quiet. Inside, the war had shifted. They thought they had me cornered. They didn't realize I had already built the escape and turned it into a fortress. And this was only the first strike. I chose the place carefully. Neutral ground, not my kitchen, not his house. A diner on the west side, the kind with cracked red vinyl booths and coffee that never truly emptied. Michael arrived late, as always, his tie loosened, his eyes shadowed with the kind of fatigue that never came from work alone. He slid into the booth across from me, barely glancing at the folder in my hands. "What's this about?" he asked, impatience dripping from his voice. I didn't waste time. I opened the folder and spread the documents across the table. Bank records, loan agreements, his signature beside mine, forged by permission he'd never asked for. The waitress set down 2 mugs of coffee and walked away without a word, sensing the storm brewing between us. Michael's eyes flicked over the papers, then hardened. "You went to the bank." "I did," I said evenly. "And I know you used my name to secure a loan you had no right to touch." His jaw tightened, his voice dropping to a growl. "I only wanted to provide for my family." I leaned in, my voice sharp as glass. "Family? Which family are you talking about? The one that shuts me out? The one that whispers about funeral homes over holiday dinners? The one that thinks my house is already theirs?" For the first time, he flinched. Not from guilt, no, that was too distant in him, but from being seen clearly. "You don't understand," he said, lowering his tone. "I was trying to keep everything afloat. Clara worries about appearances, about keeping the house looking perfect. The kids barely know my name anymore," I cut in, my words slicing through his excuses. "You borrowed against me, against the years I spent saving, against the home your father and I built with our hands, and you did it without a word." His fists clenched on the table, the coffee sloshing. "I was protecting us." I matched his fire, my voice steady but edged with fury. "No, Michael, you were protecting yourself. From what? From having to admit you can't control everything? From admitting Clara's hunger for perfection is eating you alive?" His face reddened. "You don't know her." "I know enough," I snapped. "I know she stood in my kitchen, pretending sweetness while sliding papers under my nose. I know she treats me like a burden to be managed instead of the mother who once held your entire world together." The diner had grown quieter. Conversations dipped. Forks paused in midair, but I didn't care. I wasn't whispering anymore. He finally spat the words he'd been holding. "Why can't you just make this easier? Why can't you just let go?" My voice lowered, but it carried more power than shouting ever could. "Because I am not done. Because this life is mine until the last breath leaves me. And because you, my son, forgot that I am not your liability. I am your blood." Michael sat back, his chest heaving, his eyes darting toward the window as though escape lay in the traffic outside. I gathered the papers into a neat stack, slid them back into the folder, and stood. My words were final, cold as stone. "You've lied. You've stolen. You've erased me in every way you could think of. But you will not silence me. Not anymore." He looked up, his voice breaking in a mix of anger and desperation. "What are you going to do?" I leaned down, meeting his eyes squarely. "I already have." The weight of those words hung between us as I walked out of the diner. Behind me, the bell over the door jingled lightly, absurdly cheerful against the silence that had fallen in my wake. On the street, the air was brisk, the city alive with noise. But inside me, something shifted permanently. The son I raised was gone, replaced by a man who thought betrayal could be disguised as responsibility, and I, his mother, was no longer the woman willing to excuse it. I whispered to myself as I tightened my coat and headed home, every syllable sharp and true. The war is no longer quiet. It's on my terms now. The call came at night. Clara's voice was tight, clipped, every word striking like flint. "We need to talk. Now." I could have refused, but instead I said, "Come over." When the doorbell rang, I opened it to find her standing there, perfectly dressed as always, but her face no longer carried that polished charm. Her eyes burned with fury. She brushed past me into the living room without waiting to be invited. "Do you realize what you've done?" she snapped, spinning to face me. Her heels clicked against the hardwood as she paced, too angry to stand still. I folded my hands calmly. "Enlighten me." She slammed her purse down on the coffee table. "You're dragging us all down. First that scene at the country club, then confronting Michael in public like some courtroom drama, and now cutting him out completely. You've destroyed everything we've worked for." Her words spilled faster, sharper. "From family dinners to Mother's Day, you've always been a shadow, hovering, watching, reminding us you're still there. But now you've stepped out of your place and wrecked the future we built." I felt the sting, but I refused to flinch. My voice was steady, cold. "The future of your design is not mine to serve. The story of my life is not yours to write." Her jaw tightened, color rising in her cheeks. "You're selfish. Do you even care what this means for us? For Ruby and the boys? For the image we've worked so hard to protect?" I rose from my chair, meeting her at eye level. "You mean the image of perfection that cracks the second someone sees the truth? You mean the family dinners where I sit invisible, the holidays where my presence is tolerated, not welcomed? That's not an image worth protecting, Clara. That's a mask." She laughed bitterly. "You think you're clever, but what you've done will haunt us all. Michael's reputation, our finances, even the children's opportunities. You've poisoned it." I stepped closer, my voice sharp as a blade. "No, Clara. I've only cut the strings you tried to tie around my throat. You planned my funeral over turkey and wine, whispering while I sat at the same table. Did you think I would stay silent forever?" Her eyes flickered, just for a second, betraying that she knew I had heard. Then the mask shattered completely. She raised her voice, nearly shouting, "You were supposed to fade, Helen. Quietly, gracefully. That's what women like you are meant to do." The words hung in the air, venomous and raw. I felt a heat rise inside me, not of rage, but of clarity. My reply came low and lethal. "Women like me? You mean women who raised sons while you perfected your smile in mirrors? Women who built homes brick by brick while you plotted over champagne? I will not fade, Clara. I will not give you that satisfaction." She pressed her lips together, her hands trembling on the purse handle. "You'll regret this." I tilted my head, my eyes steady on hers. "No, the only regret I carry is giving you the illusion of power for as long as I did. That ends tonight." Silence crashed between us, heavier than any scream. Even the clock on the wall seemed to stop its ticking. Clara's voice broke it, quieter now, but sharper than glass. "Michael will never forgive you." I let out a breath, calm and certain. "Then he will live with the choice he's already made. He stood by while you erased me. He let his silence do the cutting. That was his betrayal, not mine." Her eyes narrowed, her fury twisting into something darker. "You're finished," she whispered. I stepped back, pointing to the door. "No, Clara, I've just begun. You should go before you forget whose house this is." She hesitated, her chest heaving, then snatched her purse and stormed out. The door slammed, rattling the frames on the wall. I stood in the silence that followed, my heartbeat steady, my hands unshaking. For years, Clara had smiled while slicing at me with polite cruelty. Tonight, the mask had fallen. Tonight, her venom had spilled into the open. And tonight, for the first time, she saw me not as a shadow, not as a ghost at her table, but as an adversary who would not be erased. I whispered into the empty room, the words solid as stone. "The future of my life is mine to write, and you, Clara, will never hold the pen." The house was quiet after Clara's stormy exit. The silence clung like smoke, heavy, suffocating, until a soft knock came at my door. I opened it to find Emily, her sketchbook tucked under her arm, her eyes bright but uncertain. "Grandma," she said, her voice hushed. "Can I come in?" I nodded, stepping aside. She walked into the living room, settling onto the couch where only minutes earlier Clara had been spitting venom. Emily pulled the sketchbook into her lap and flipped through pages filled with strokes of charcoal and watercolor. She stopped at one page and carefully tore it free. She handed it to me. My breath caught when I saw it. It was a chessboard. On one side, a queen sat almost alone, surrounded by scattered pawns. Across from her stood a wall of pieces, rooks, bishops, a knight, and a king looming behind them. But the queen's path was clear, her next move inevitable. Victory was hers, even with fewer soldiers. I traced the drawing with trembling fingers. "Emily, you drew this?" She nodded, her eyes shining. "I watched everything. The way Dad talks to you, the way Mom treats you. I know what they say when they think I'm not listening. But Grandma, I see you. You're stronger than all of them. Even when you look like you're losing, you always know how to win." Emotion pressed against my chest, but I kept my voice steady. "This isn't easy for you. Choosing sides never is." She shook her head. "It's not hard at all. I choose you. Because you never lied to me, you never pretended, you never made me feel small. I don't care what Dad or Mom say. You're not a burden. You're my family." Her words sliced through the bitterness that had lingered since Mother's Day. For weeks I had walked alone in my own house, my own life. Now for the first time, someone stood beside me, not out of duty, but out of choice. I looked at the drawing again, at the queen carved in careful strokes. "Do you understand what this means, Emily? Standing with me puts you against your parents." Her chin lifted, stubborn and proud. "They stopped being parents when they stopped being honest. If they want me to admire them, they should earn it. You already have." I felt the corners of my mouth curve into the faintest smile. "You're braver than you know." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Grandma, they think you're weak because you don't shout. But I know better. You don't need to shout. You make silence feel louder than their noise." The words settled deep, striking something inside me I hadn't let myself touch in years. My hand rested over hers. "Promise me one thing," I said. "Promise you won't let their bitterness shape you." She squeezed my hand, firm. "I promise. And I promise I'll help you however I can. You won't face them alone." I studied her face, seeing not just the granddaughter I'd watched grow, but the young woman she was becoming. Strong, steady, unafraid of truth. "Emily," I said softly, "in a world where people measure strength by noise, remember that real power is quiet, deliberate, and certain, like a queen on a chessboard." Her eyes glistened. "Then that's who you are, the queen, and I'll never let anyone forget it." The clock ticked softly in the background. For the first time in weeks, the silence around me wasn't heavy, it was full, alive with possibility. I set the drawing on the mantel where the evening light could touch it. The queen looked back at me, defiant and unstoppable. Emily rested her head on my shoulder. "Grandma, I love you." I placed a hand on her hair, my voice low but resolute. "And I love you, more than they will ever understand. With you beside me, Emily, this battle is no longer mine alone." The war in my family was far from over. But that night, I felt something shift. My enemies lived under the same roof as my son. But my ally, my truest ally, sat beside me, handing me strength in the form of a hand-drawn queen. And I knew then, with a clarity sharper than any blade, that the board had changed. The air was heavy before they even arrived. I knew Clara well enough to predict her moves, and I knew Michael would follow. So when the doorbell rang and I opened it to see the two of them with a tall man in a navy suit carrying a leather briefcase, I wasn't surprised. Clara's smile was tight, brittle, almost triumphant. Michael wouldn't even meet my eyes. "Mother," Clara said smoothly, "we thought it was time to settle things properly. We brought counsel with us, just to make sure everything is handled fairly." Her tone dripped with the arrogance of someone certain the trap had already been sprung. I stepped aside, gesturing to the dining room. By all means. The lawyer set his case on the table, snapping open the brass clasps with practiced efficiency. Papers slid across the polished wood, documents filled with dense paragraphs and numbered clauses. Clara sat tall, Michael rigid beside her. "This," the lawyer began, his voice even, "is a proposed amendment to your estate planning. It consolidates property rights and designates your son, Michael, as sole executor and beneficiary. We believe this ensures the family's stability moving forward." Clara folded her hands delicately, her eyes glinting. "All you need to do is sign, Mother. We'll take care of the rest." I looked at the papers, then at each of their faces. Michael's jaw was tight, his eyes darting. Clara radiated smugness. I let the silence stretch until it grew uncomfortable, until even the lawyer shifted slightly in his seat. Then I spoke, my voice calm, deliberate. "You've gone to a great deal of trouble, hired your own lawyer, drafted your schemes on expensive paper. But there's a problem." Clara leaned forward. "And what might that be?" I pulled a different folder from the sideboard drawer and set it gently on top of their documents. The leather was smooth, the edges crisp, still warm from the notary's seal. I slid it across the table, opening it just enough for the gold-embossed header to catch their eyes. "Living Trust of Helen Ward." Clara's smile faltered. Michael's eyes widened. "This," I said, tapping the page with one steady finger, "is already in effect. Signed, sealed, irrevocable. Every clause legal, every signature witnessed, and it leaves neither of you with the power you thought you had." The lawyer blinked, his composure cracking. He scanned the first page, then the second. By the time he reached the third, his expression had tightened into resignation. He closed the folder slowly and cleared his throat. "Mrs. Ward is correct. If this trust has been executed and notarized as stated, it supersedes any document you've asked me to draft." Clara turned pale, her mask crumbling. "That can't be—" "Oh, but it is," I cut in, my tone sharp as steel. I began preparing the moment I heard the whispers behind me on Mother's Day. I knew then that my silence would be my undoing, so I chose another path. Michael finally looked at me, his voice strained. You really did this?" I held his gaze without flinching. "I did, and every step was deliberate. You used my name at the bank. Clara tried to slide contracts beneath my hand. You both thought I was too blind to see, too weak to resist, but you misjudged me." Clara slammed her palm against the table. "You'll ruin us!" I leaned forward, my voice low but cutting. "No, Clara. You ruined yourselves when greed became your god. I only protected what was mine." The lawyer closed his case with finality. "There is nothing further I can do here. Mrs. Ward's trust is binding. My advice is to accept it." He stood, nodded politely to me, and walked out, leaving them gaping in silence. Clara's face twisted, fury breaking through her veneer. "You've destroyed this family." I straightened, my voice ringing with certainty. "No, I preserved its last shred of dignity. What you wanted was not family, it was conquest. And you underestimated the woman you thought you had already buried." Michael's shoulders slumped, his voice hollow. "What happens now?" I looked at him, my son, my blood, and yet so far from the boy I had raised. "Now you live with the choices you made. You planned my funeral before I was gone. Consider this my resurrection." The words landed heavy. Clara grabbed her purse, her heels striking the floor like gunshots as she stormed out. Michael lingered, his eyes wet with something between shame and rage, then followed without a word. The house fell quiet again. I gathered the trust documents and returned them to their drawer, locking it with a steady hand. For the first time in months, the silence around me was not suffocating. It was victorious. I whispered into the empty room, every syllable deliberate. "The board is mine, the game is mine, and they will never play me again." The morning was sharp and cold, the kind of Chicago air that sliced through coats and scarves. Emily walked beside me, her gloved hand tucked in mine. In my other hand, I carried the envelope, heavy, not with paper, but with finality. The Greenway Women's Shelter stood at the corner of Greenfield Avenue, its red brick facade plain but steady. Children's laughter drifted faintly from inside, mingling with the sounds of traffic. As we stepped through the doors, warmth enveloped us. The reception smelled faintly of coffee and detergent, the air buzzing with life. A volunteer greeted us with a kind smile. "Mrs. Ward, thank you for coming. They're expecting you." We were led into a modest common room, decorated with crayon drawings taped to the walls. Women sat in folding chairs, some cradling infants, others watching toddlers toddle across a threadbare rug. Their eyes carried exhaustion, but also a spark of survival. The director of the shelter, a tall woman named Marcia, approached with outstretched hands. "Helen, thank you for being here. You didn't have to come in person." "Yes," I replied, my voice steady. "I did." I pulled the envelope from my coat and opened it. Inside lay the check, signed and sealed, its amount written in bold ink. I placed it directly into Marcia's hands. "This is for Greenway, enough to repair the roof, fund programs, and keep the doors open for years." Gasps rippled through the room. A young mother rose, her baby balanced against her shoulder. Tears streamed down her face as she stepped closer. "You don't know what this means," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Last week I didn't know where we'd sleep. And now you've saved us." She fell into my arms, clutching me as if I were a lifeline. The baby stirred, his tiny hand brushing my cheek. Emotion tightened my chest, but my hands remained firm around her. Emily stood at my side, watching, her eyes wide and glistening. She reached for my hand, squeezing it with a quiet fierceness. "Grandma," she said softly, "you turned their cruelty into this. You turned revenge into something good." I looked down at her, the chessboard image of her drawing flashing in my mind. The queen surrounded but unbroken. "No, Emily," I answered, my voice calm but cutting through the room. "This isn't revenge, this is justice. They tried to erase me, but I chose to leave a mark they'll never touch." Marcia's voice cracked with emotion. "You've done more than give us money. You've given hope. That's something none of us can ever repay." I straightened, my eyes sweeping the room. "Then repay it by surviving, by showing your children that no matter who tries to write your ending, you can take back the pen." Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then rising, filling the modest room until it echoed against the brick walls. The young mother still held me, whispering, "You've given us a second chance." Emily leaned closer, her voice firm and bright. "Grandma, you're not invisible. Not anymore. Not to me. Not to them." I nodded slowly, the corners of my lips curving into a rare smile. "Good, because invisibility was never my destiny." The director handed me a folder of letters drawn in crayon, thank you notes from children who had lived within those walls, scribbled hearts, shaky handwriting, stick figures with wide smiles. I held them gently, as though they were as precious as the check itself. For a long moment, I let the noise of gratitude fill me, not as a shield, not as a weapon, but as proof. Proof that even when family tried to bury me, I could rise, stronger than their schemes, louder than their silence. I looked at Emily, her hand still tight in mine. "This is our legacy, Emily. Not money, not houses, but the lives we choose to lift." She smiled back, fierce and proud. "Then it's the best legacy anyone could leave." We stood together in that crowded room, 2 generations bound not by inheritance, but by choice. And in that moment, the whispers that had once cut me on Mother's Day were nothing but ghosts. The truth was louder, brighter, unstoppable. I had planned my revenge, but what I delivered was redemption. The year passed faster than I thought it would. The noise of battles, the weight of betrayals, the signatures that changed the course of everything. Those had all settled into silence. Now I lived in a small apartment overlooking Lincoln Park. The building was modest, but the view opened wide. Children flying kites, couples walking their dogs, tulips pushing through the soil. Freedom had no marble floors, but it had sunlight and fresh air, and that was enough. On the morning of Mother's Day, I brewed a pot of coffee and sat by the window, the cup warm in my hands. The memory of the last Mother's Day still stung, a table filled with whispers about my death, the humiliation of being erased in plain sight. But today was different. Today, I wasn't invisible. Today, I was free. A knock sounded at the door. When I opened it, Emily stood there with a bouquet of red tulips, her smile bright against the cool morning air. She stepped inside, placing the flowers into my hands. "Happy Mother's Day, Grandma." I breathed in the scent of fresh earth and petals, the color rich and alive. "Tulips," I said softly. "Your grandfather used to bring me these every spring." Emily grinned. "Then I'll carry the tradition." We arranged them in a glass vase on the table. The tulips stood tall, crimson against the sunlight streaming through the window. Emily sat across from me, her hands folded, watching me with the same steady gaze she'd given me the night she showed me her drawing of the Queen. "Grandma," she said quietly, "do you ever regret it? Everything you did this past year?" I set my coffee down and looked her straight in the eye. "No, not once." My voice was calm but unshakable. "I learned something, Emily. The best revenge isn't about making others hurt. It's about living your life fully, without apology. They tried to bury me, but I chose to bloom. That is the only victory worth having." Her eyes glistened. "You've taught me more than anyone else ever has. About strength, about dignity, about not letting people decide who you're supposed to be." I reached across the table, placing my hand over hers. "Then listen well, Emily. The world will try to put you in a corner, tell you you're too much or not enough, but your life is your own. Never let them write it for you. That's the lesson I want you to carry." We sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that felt whole, not empty. Outside, laughter rang across the park, a boy chasing after a kite that danced against the sky. Inside, the tulips glowed like flames. I thought of Michael, of Clara, of the house that no longer belonged to them. I thought of the women at the shelter, the young mother who had wept in my arms, her child's tiny hand brushing my cheek, and I thought of the girl now sitting across from me, my granddaughter, who had chosen me when no one else did. The pain of betrayal was still there, etched into my bones, but it no longer ruled me. What ruled me now was peace. Not the peace of silence forced upon me, but the peace of a life reclaimed. Emily's voice broke the quiet. "Grandma, next year, let's spend Mother's Day at the shelter. We can bring flowers for the women there, red tulips, for hope." I smiled, feeling warmth spread through me. "Yes, Emily, that's how we'll honor the day, not with whispers of endings, but with promises of new beginnings." The clock ticked gently in the background, the air filled with the faint scent of tulips and coffee. For the first time in a long time, I felt no shadow pressing against me. The weight of last year's cruelty had lifted, replaced by something stronger, brighter. I looked out the window at the park, at the sunlight pouring across the grass, and spoke softly, almost to myself. "This is what victory feels like." Emily squeezed my hand. "No, Grandma, this is what freedom feels like." I nodded slowly, letting the words settle deep inside. She was right. Freedom. Not the absence of chains, but the choice to live without fear, without silence, without permission. Mother's Day had once been the day I discovered betrayal. Now it was the day I claimed my life back. And as long as I lived, it would never again be anything less. The lamp on my desk cast a circle of light across the pages of my journal. Outside, the city murmured in the distance, but in this room there was only quiet, the kind I had earned. My pen moved steadily, words forming with the precision of truth. "They once asked why I was still alive," I wrote. "Now I have my answer. I am alive to remember my own name, to hold space for those who know how to value it, to teach a young girl that silence is never the answer." I paused, the ink still glistening. The weight of the past year pressed against me, not as a burden, but as proof. Proof that even when betrayal circles you, even when whispers try to write your ending, you can still take the pen back. I thought of Michael and Clara, faces twisted by fear of losing control, voices dripping with contempt. They had planned my funeral before my heart had stopped beating, but I had written my resurrection. I thought of Emily, the drawing of the Queen, the red tulips, her hand tightening around mine. She had chosen light when it would have been easier to stay in shadow, and in her choice, she gave me back more than they ever tried to steal. My pen scratched across the page again. Revenge was never the goal. Survival was. Dignity was. Justice was. And in the end, the sweetest justice was not watching them fall, but standing tall while they realized I would never bend. The room was silent, but alive with memory. The shelter, the women whose tears wet my shoulder, the child's tiny hand brushing my cheek. They had called me savior, but I was only reclaiming what should never have been stolen, the right to live and to give freely. I wrote on, each word striking like a bell. To anyone who believes age means invisibility, remember this: you are not shadows. You are not whispers. You are not burdens to be erased. You are voices, steady and unbroken. Use them, speak them, live them. I closed the journal and placed the pen beside it. My reflection stared back from the darkened window, not fragile, not forgotten, but calm, resolute, untouchable. I spoke aloud, my voice filling the room, though no one else was there. The board was theirs once, now it is mine, and with my last breath, I will teach Emily and every woman who comes after us that silence is never victory, living fully is. The camera of life would have stopped there, on my face, weathered by years, but lit with quiet strength. No bitterness, no despair, only the calm of someone who had walked through fire and come out whole. The best revenge was not pain. The best revenge was peace, and peace, at last, was mine.